Well, hello there again, First Communion students. Since we were not able to get together to make communion bread, as I promised, I thought I would demonstrate here at the church kitchen, demonstrate on making the bread for you and with you, that you could do this at home. So let me grab the recipe. The recipe that we're going to be following is communion bread recipe from the monastic people. It's a group of women who live in a monastery, and they religious order of people who make communion bread for churches. So I'll share this recipe with you. But first of all, what is communion bread, or the Eucharist bread, or the Lord's Supper bread? There are various names. It's called Holy Communion, the Lord's Supper, Eucharist. And these are all ways to talk about the bread, but also the body and blood of Jesus. Remember, when you were making your communion banner, you were learning about bread and grape juice or wine, and how Jesus picked those items up from the table from the Last Supper. He took some bread and he lifted it up and he said, when you eat of this bread, remember me and think of me. And he broke it and gave it to his disciples to eat. And the same with the chalice, with that cup, the wine or grape juice. He said, this is my blood shed for you. And so when you eat this meal, when you drink from this cup, remember me, that I am with you always. So why communion bread? And why do we have bread at communion? Well, because Jesus did that with his disciples. He had bread and said, this is my body. Metaphorically, he was speaking. But also, he instructed that his disciples should share bread with one another. And in that sharing of the bread, it would be sharing Jesus as well. And that Jesus would be present in that bread. So today we're going to make unleavened bread. And church, if you were, now let's see, today's Wednesday. Tomorrow is Monday, Thursday, and you would be receiving First Communion. So tomorrow night you would be receiving your First Communion, and you would have flat little wafers. That's what we use here. But then we talked about that we would make communion bread here at church, and then we would have that as your First Communion. That would be your bread. It's called unleavened bread. And that unleavened bread comes from Exodus, the Bible, one of the books in the Bible. And it talks about during the Passover, when all the Israelites were to be freed, when Moses was going to free them from Egypt, from Herod, or Pharaoh, King Pharaoh, that he was going to free the Israelites. But the instructions from God was that they would take a lamb and they would cook the lamb, and it was a proper way of cooking the lamb over fire, but also that they would take unleavened bread. And unleavened bread is bread that doesn't have yeast in it. And yeast is what makes the bread rise and makes it get really puffy, like the loaves of bread that we have at home. But this doesn't have any yeast in it, and it's kind of like flatbread. It doesn't really get puffy and it doesn't rise. So that's what we're going to do today. And our recipe calls for 4 cups of flour. I like to use whole wheat flour, and so this is 2 cups. And so if I follow the 2-cup line mark, so I'm going to do 2. I'm going to do 2 of these, which is each is 2 cups, so that makes 4 cups. Okay, so at home you just want to find a bowl that's large enough to hold several cups of ingredients, like 4 cups of flour. So you're going to want to do that, and that's what it looks like in the bowl with 4 cups of flour. And then it says that we need 4 teaspoons of double-acting baking powder. And this is going to help it bake. So what I'm going to do is I brought some baking powder from home. I don't think we had it here at church. But I'm going to add 4, it says 4 teaspoons. So this is a teaspoon, regular teaspoon. You might have some special measuring devices at home, special little measuring teaspoons. Little special, they say like a teaspoon on it. So I just put 4 in there. So we're going to mix this up. We're going to I just have this little rubber spatula, but I'm going to use that. I'm going to fold it together and mix it in so that baking powder is kind of well blended with my flour. Then the recipe calls for some salt. So we need to find some salt here. I thought I had all my ingredients out. Let's look in the church kitchen here. Here's some salt. Lord forbid, I found some salt here. So at home you can find, so it's 2 teaspoons. Remember, teaspoons is the little t. The big T is tablespoon. So 2 teaspoons of salt. Okay, so we got that. We're going to mix that together. Okay, and then we also need to add some honey. It's a half a cup of honey. I have a small cup here. So if there's like half mark there, it means half a cup. So I put the honey in the microwave to kind of soften it up a little bit. Needs a little more time. So half a cup of honey. We need a half a cup of milk. Pardon my reach here, but so we need a half a cup of milk. So we're going to do that. Just take some milk from the refrigerator. You're going to add half a cup. Okay. Honey is in the microwave. It was getting, it got a little sugary, like if honey sits around and it gets grainy, it kind of turns into sugar. So I was melting it so we could bake with this. So we're going to dump the honey in. Do a half a cup of honey. It's almost about enough here. It's about all I'm going to get out of this bottle. Okay, so dump this half a cup of honey in this bowl with this flour. Okay. All the honey in there. So I'm going to take this rubber spatula and wipe it out into the bowl. Clean it up good. Okay, so we also need a half a cup of water. So I have to go behind you here, get the water, half a cup. So I'm doing that, half a cup of water. Now you don't want to add too much liquid at once. You can always add more, but it's too hard to take liquid away. So, and I know we need to add some vegetable oil as well. So we need to add a half a cup of vegetable oil. So you want to follow the recipe. As I said, if you add too much liquid, it can be kind of hard to work with, and you'll see that in a little bit. Okay, there's a half a cup of oil. This is regular vegetable oil. So I'll show you again. Vegetable oil. It's called baking powder, salt, and some honey. And I pretty much emptied this honey out of this bottle, out of this container. So now we're going to stir this together. So this is what it looks like. It's kind of all clumpy. It's almost like working with Play-Doh right now. And it doesn't look like you'd want to eat this. It doesn't look like bread. It looks more like Play-Doh. But you want to fold it all together. Fold it means like just working the outside in. Folding the floury, flaky, dusty part inside, in the center of the bowl. Okay, but it's very important that you keep kneading it, working it, folding it in. Folding it is just taking from the outside and folding it to the inside. Taking the dry powder from the outer side of the bowl and folding it to the inside of the bowl. Okay. Now what I'm going to do pretty soon is I'm going to wash my hands. Again, my hands are clean, but I'm going to pick this up. I'm going to use my hands to kind of fold this together. Now if you're at home and you could put some gloves on if you want to do that, if you have some rubber gloves, plastic gloves at home. Otherwise, just wash your hands really good. And I'm going to do this here. I'm going to run behind you again here and wash my hands. Sorry to step out of the picture. Washing my hands. Okay, so I'm going to dry my hands. So hopefully you guys are all doing well at home. I know it's a bummer, you can't be at school and your schedule's totally different and all the bad stuff that's going on with the virus and sick people and people dying, but we have faith that we'll get through this, right? We'll get through this together. That's what we've all been saying. There's been some real hard times in our country and our human history before, and Lord willing, and Lord with us, we'll get through this. You know, in the story of, well, the Exodus story, it's the story of Moses freeing the Israelites. If you remember, the Israelites are the Jewish people, God's chosen people. And they ended up in Egypt because of Joseph. Oh, there was a good number of boys. I think there were like 12 of them. And Joseph was one of these, one of these guys that God called. God talked to. He had a great relationship. Joseph had a great relationship with God. And God needed Joseph and talked to Joseph. But God talked to Joseph through dreams, through all these dreams. So Joseph would have a dream, and then it would come true. It would come to be real. It would come to fruition. So, anyways, here's the bread. Okay, so it's like clay in a sense. I've been working it with my hands. You can feel the oil in it. You can feel the honey, and you can smell everything. It's just really good. So what we're going to do, sometimes what I do with kids is, maybe I'm making this with kids, like you guys. Let's clear an area here. Let's get rid of this stuff. Get the Bible, the cookbook dirty. So what I'll do is I'll lay out some saran wrap. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll lay out a big piece, stretch it out. Hopefully I'm still in the camera here. Let's see, I'll move down to the end. And I'll take like a nice amount of this bread dough. It's unleavened bread again. And I'll put it here. Let's see if you can see here. I don't exactly know it. It's just me here doing this, running the camera and making the dough. So what we want to do is make sure that the dough is not falling apart. And the way you can do that is by just kind of working it, making a nice ball and working all the ingredients together. And then what we're going to do is we're going to lay it in this saran wrap, fold it over, and you're going to press it. You're going to make a nice flat, like a thick pancake in a sense. Okay? And the saran wrap allows it to not get stick to the counter, and you can actually shape it better. You can press it out pretty good. You can really work with it. It's kind of like, again, it's like working with Play-Doh in a sense. You don't want it too thick. You probably want it like a ½ inch thick, because it won't bake very well. I mean, you don't want it all dry and falling apart, but I'll show you here. And we're going to bake it at like 400 degrees for 10 to 12 minutes. So this is how thick, like a ½ inch. You want to make sure it's not all falling apart around the edges. You want to push it together pretty good, because when it bakes, you want it to remain together. You want it to be totally together and not falling apart. I'm going to put it back in here and make it smooth. Okay. So there's that. It feels pretty heavy. Put it on a baking sheet. We're going to take another round ball. Take another amount, like a small baseball. That's the size of the amount of dough you're going to have in your hand, like a small baseball. Okay, so back to the Israelites. So Moses was freeing the Israelites from Egypt. And the Israelites, God's chosen people, the Jewish people, ended up there in Egypt because of Joseph, and Joseph being there and being a servant for the king and for Pharaoh, for the leader of Egypt through Joseph's work. It's another long story. But anyways, all these Israelite people became slaves to Pharaoh. They became slaves that Pharaoh was trying to control, population control. He was trying to keep them from growing in numbers. He was trying to keep them, the Israelites, from growing in number. And but he would put them to work. They were slaves, and they had hard work, and they were treated poorly, and living conditions were terrible. It was just a bad situation. And so the Israelites wanted to be freed. They wanted to go out and live on their own, but they had been taken care of so long by Pharaoh or by the leaders of Egypt that they were even afraid to go out on their own. They'd never really lived out on their own. But they weren't able to leave. Pharaoh wouldn't let them go. So Moses was sent by God to free them, to get Pharaoh to free them, let them go. And there were 10 plagues. Like one of them was a drought. One was the water turned to blood, to red blood. One was like all these like insects, locusts came and ate all the crops. And all these different things. And Pharaoh still wouldn't give in. Pharaoh's whole livelihood and life was affected by the plagues that God kept sending, hoping that Pharaoh would give in, that he would change his mind and let the Israelites go. And finally God said, this hard-necked, hard-headed guy isn't going to give in, isn't going to let my people go. So he said, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take something away from Pharaoh that is the greatest thing, the thing that Pharaoh loves the most, and the most valuable thing to Pharaoh, and that's his son, his oldest, his son. And actually the firstborn boys in the family would take over the family business, would take the throne, and would be the leader, would be the leader of the home or the land or the kingship and all that. So what happened is God had all the Israelites put blood on their doorposts. And so take a lamb, kill a lamb, eat the meat, put some blood over the doorposts, and then that night, the night of the Passover, that's what the Passover is called, that night, that wherever there would be a house with goat's blood or lamb's blood over the doorway, the angel of death would pass over that house. And of course Pharaoh didn't do that. Pharaoh didn't know that God commanded all the Israelites to put blood over their doorposts, and so that night the angel of death took Pharaoh's son. And that broke Pharaoh's heart. And Pharaoh gave in and let the Israelites go. But the instruction was to hurry up and cook a lamb or a goat and take some unleavened bread, unleavened, which means bread that doesn't rise, and be ready to hit the road, be packed and ready to go, because tomorrow this is going to happen. And that's what the Lord instructed them. And that's how the Israelites were able to be freed. And they got out of Egypt. But because of an unleavened bread will keep a long time because there's no yeast in it. Okay, no yeast in it. And yeast not only makes the bread rise and makes it fluffy, but it will also make it not last as long. That's why we get green, we'll get moldy bread if it's on the counter too long, because it's yeast. It's just like a little bacteria. And yeast is good for us. It's actually penicillin in that, but too much of it and it's not good for you, and different types of it's not good for you, plus you don't like to eat moldy food. But anyways, so here we are making unleavened bread. It's a very biblical story. It's all part of the Israelites' Passover story. The Jewish people, we were of the Jewish people, believe it or not. That's part of our Christian heritage. Jesus was a Jew. And I have some Jewish blood in me, and you may too. And so we're almost finished here. So we're making this bread, and we're almost finished. And again, the reason you're making this is because this is communion bread. This is what the church really could be. We could be making this, and we could be using it on Sunday, and you could be make this at home. It's something to kind of prepare. And probably what we'll end up doing is having some of you guys, bring some of your bread, and then when we get back together again and we're able to share church worship together, you'll receive your first communion. You'll have your first communion. Here's one of the favorite things I like to do. Make a cross on the top of each one. Take the handle or the end of the spoon and make a cross. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. The cross, every little wafer, namely every little wafer that I've seen, has a little cross stamped on it. It's the cross, it's a Christian faith, the cross of Christ. It's our salvation and that. So here we go. We have 6 unleavened breads, and we're going to put them in the oven. The oven's set for 400, and we're going to let them bake for about 10 to 12 minutes. Okay? So, I'm going to shut the camera off. I'm going to clean up my mess, and when I come back, I'm going to share the recipe. I'm going to move the camera to the recipe so you can write it down. And try this at home. This is good preparation. It's many churches make their own bread. Bread is Jesus said, man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord. So this bread and our faith and our prayers keeps us kind of together, bound together with Jesus. And it's part of our Christian story, it's part of our Christian heritage, and it's part of our preparation in our faith journey. So I'm going to take a break, let the bread bake, and I'll be right back. All right, I'm back. So here's the recipe. I think that we'll get this recipe to you in another way, but in email or maybe on a separate piece of paper or something. But here's the recipe that I follow, and you can copy this down. I'll leave it up for a bit. And what I like about it is, even though it's you can use any kind of flour, but I like to use the wheat flour because it's wheat is from the earth. God gave us the seeds and the soil and the sun and the rain to grow the wheat, and wheat is a staple in our diet, so I like the wheat. This bread will have a nice honey flavor. It won't be super dry because of the oil, and actually I think it's just really good for pretty much all the students and their families and people at church in the past. My experience is that people really like it, so I would encourage you to make it. If you make this, if you do go ahead and make this at home, maybe save one piece. Just freeze it and bring it to church when you have your first communion. We'll thaw out some bread that you guys make at home, and when you bring it in, we'll use it. But yeah, just try it. You could do that while you're home here. You may not have time today or tomorrow, but before we actually are worshiping together again and back into the swing of things here at church, you certainly probably could find some time to make it. So other things. Honey is from the bees, which are a God-made, given, insect for us to enjoy, but also the bees make honey, and honey is something that we love to eat. Honey is in a lot of different things. Same as milk is from cows, and the vegetable oil is from vegetables, so it's all natural, and it's all ordinary things. And remember how I said God takes ordinary things and does extraordinary things with it. God takes ordinary people like Moses and turned him into an extraordinary person to free the Israelites from slavery under Pharaoh. And just like you, God will take ordinary you and do something very extraordinary with you, and change the world. You might even come up with, the next cure for the big virus that paralyzes the world. I'm sure you'll do wonderful, great things when you grow up, and even now, the things that you're doing. But so something else I wanted to say. What if you can't have any of these things? What if you're gluten? Or whatever, you need to have certain, you can't have, you're allergic to honey, or you can't drink, the milk is such a little bit, but still, there is a recipe that Heidi has. It's gluten-free, so it has all the ingredients that will keep you free from getting sick or any of the symptoms that you might have. But anyways, I'm going to pause this, I'm going to check the bread, and we'll see how we're doing. Okay, well, we're back. It's been about 10-12 minutes, and I think it's time to check our bread. And so as I've been waiting, I've been missing you guys, and I was thinking, you remember when you were a kid, and at least when I was a kid, in school, we would teach us this, we'd sit around and twiddle our thumbs, right, waiting for the bread to bake. And I thought about this, you take your hands and you make a little steeple, which means the church. So you say like, here's the church, here's the steeple, open the door and see no people. There are no people in church. I miss you guys. So hopefully you're doing well, and when we get back together again, we'll have communion and we'll have bread. So turn the oven off. I think this is good. It's starting to get brown around the edges. You don't want it too brown around the edges because it dries it out and it gets really crumbly. But it's got to be firm, as you can tell. It's sort of expanded. It rise a little bit. That's what the baking powder does. It kind of helps it to bake and all that. But so it's pretty firm. And it's pretty hot though too, so I can't pick up some and hand it to you. But so it's finished, and I'm going to pick up one. I have kind of like calloused hands. You can tell it's brown on the bottom. Don't do this at home because you burn yourself. My hands are pretty callous because I'm doing a lot of different things and that. And you get older, your hands are just thicker, and maybe I don't feel as much or something. But anyways, it's nice. See a little bit of a cross there, and so I won't be saving this for you. You'll be making your own. And eventually we'll be back together again. So let's do this. Here's the church, here's the steeple. You gotta do this, you gotta do it reverse. Close the door. Here's the church, here's the steeple. Open the door and see all the people. So I'm looking forward to being back with you guys. I hope you're doing well, stay healthy, and be good, and have a great Easter. In a few days it's going to be Easter. It's going to be the resurrection of Jesus. We're going to celebrate that. We're going to, you won't be able to, be with your family, like grandpas and grandmas and aunts and uncles, probably won't, but you'll be at home with your immediate family, and so do all those fun things. We'll see you again. Bye-bye.